beer score sheets. In this video I'm going to guide you through the three main BJCP style of score sheets that are used so that you can get a full understanding of how to fill them in or how to read them if you're getting feedback from a competition, how to understand what they say, what they mean, and how to fill them in if you're looking to become a judge, what information goes in each area, and how to make sure that you've filled them in correctly. Okay, so there's three main types of score sheets that are commonly used at BJCP competition. These aren't exclusive to the BJCP, you might find them used at other competitions. You might find very different feedback from competitions that may still be AHA or BJCP sanctioned. It is totally up to the competition organiser what score sheet they use and what format the feedback, if any, comes in. Because some organisers don't provide any feedback at all to entrants. The only thing you hear is, yes, you won, here's your prize, or nothing if you come further down. What you'll normally find though with every AHA, American Homebrewers Association, or BJCP, Beer Judge Certification Program sanctioned competition, is that you will get full feedback from at least one or two qualified judges on each of the beers you enter. This here now is one of the first of the three types. This was probably what most people think of as the original score sheet, and is still used by some competitions today. It's built out into several different sections. At the top here you'll normally find a sticker stuck on instead of it being hand filled by the judge. Underneath, if it isn't on the sticker, it will tell you whether they're BJCP recognised, certified, what their rank is. Basically, if you're Grandmaster certified, then you're higher qualified than if you recognised or apprentice or a novice. You'll also find that competitions also use non-BJCP judges, or they may if they choose to, and you'll find what it is about the person filling in this form that qualifies them to judge your beer here. So they might be a cicerone, they might be a judge with sensory training, they might be a professional brewer, cider maker, whatever. So it should tell you a bit about them there, just so you know who's judging your beer. Underneath here you'll find a quick tick list of descriptors for different things you can find in your beer. So for instance, if the judge notices any acetaldehyde in your beer, this should be ticked. In the case of this style of score sheet, that should be ticked for anything that's detected in the beer, whatever level it's at. So if it's noticeable, it should be ticked regardless of if it's high, medium, low, or if it's even a fault, because not all these things are necessarily a fault in all styles. For instance, some styles do allow a low level of DMS. You can get yeasty beers without it being a fault, but other than that, some of these, like light struck's always a fault. Oxidized shouldn't be oxidized. You can have estery or phenolic beer and it be in character. So just because you got a tick here, it doesn't mean it's a fault, it just means that it was detectable in your beer. Moving on to the right hand side, you should find that this has been filled in. It will tell you what category the beer was judged in, a subcategory. So this is normally a number and a letter, and an entry number or judging number for your beer. One that a lot of judges forget to fill out is to actually write in there the category name, because 12A may not mean much to everyone, so they normally write the name there. If there were any special ingredients declared to the judges, it should say this on this line here, they should fill that in. Moving on down, the bottle inspection. we just have a quick look at the bottle when it's presented to us. Make sure it's an appropriate size. Now you'll notice straight away I'm pointing to these words that are written on here. And each section tells you exactly what you should expect to find there. So as we go down the sheet, you'll see this more and more often. So it's just a case of checking, is the bottle size appropriate? Has someone put in a 2 litre bottle of a 2 litre pop bottle? Is it filled to an appropriate level? Was the label removed? Did the bottle look tidy? Was there any identifying features that shouldn't have been there? And just a room to put comments. Now normally what you might find there is that a judge might put it was bottle conditioned or it was overfilled, underfilled. For instance, sometimes we'll see beers with a 4-inch gap at the top of it. We'll put there that it's underfilled. It normally leads to carbonation problems if that's the case. Underneath that, you'll see 5 different sections. There's the title of the section and a reminder that everything should be described as is it appropriate for the style. Over here, you'll see a place to write the score for that section and the number of points that were available in that section. So beers are normally scored out of 50 points for BJCP competition. The breakdown of that is Aroma is worth 12 points, Appearance is worth 3, Flavour is worth 20, Mouthfeel is worth 5, and overall impression is 10. So depending if the judge has had too many beers or not yet, that should add up to the number down here where you get your total mark out of 50. We'll go into this section in some more detail in a minute, but we'll just quickly look down the bottom here. And beers are based on this scoring guide here. So you'll see if a beer is scored in total between 45 and 50 out of 50, it's considered to be a world-class example of the style. And on down. So 30 points, very good. 14, problematic, is fair. And 13 or under is problematic. So all the comments and everything that go down here leading to this score should tally with what goes in over here. So for instance, if the comments are saying that there was big problems with the beer, you'd expect the score to be 0 to 13. If the comments are saying that it was amazing, best beer they've ever had, there'll be 45 to 50 would be the expected score. Down here we've just got a quick sanity check. I don't normally use that term, but it's a good way to describe it. We just have a tick box for the different parts of the beer. So how good it was to style. Was it not to style at all, or was it a world-class classic example of the style? Was there big problems with the beer? Was it brewed perfectly? What was the impression of it, the intangibles we call them? Was it lifeless or was it wonderful? And then you can use your ticks here to judge whether you've got this figure right alongside this. So if you say it was not to style and it had significant flaws, we certainly wouldn't expect it to be getting more than 21. So you can see down the bottom here, there's a little description for each level. So if it's 14 to 20, you've got off flavours or aromas or major style deficiencies, the beer is generally unpleasant. So this gives you a good clue what the beer needs to be in score wise in line with this. So what goes into each of these sections up here? So normally, and different judges do different things, but normally one of the first things we check on opening a bottle is the aroma, because there's some aromatic compounds that are very volatile and disappear very quickly after opening. So we normally go in for a quick sniff as soon as we pour the beer, see what impressions we get, make a note of them here. And then personally, I then go on and look at appearance. go back, have another sniff, talk about the aroma some more then. And throughout judging the beer, we'll take 10-15 minutes of beer on average. Things will develop. The beer might warm in the hand, it might warm up if it's been served cold. If it's cold out, beer might cool down even. But as the temperatures change and the beer's been open a while, different aromas and flavours seem to come to the fore. We tend to go back to each of these sections a couple of times whilst filling them in. With aroma, we normally look for malt. What character of malt are we getting? Is it bready malt? Is it grainy? Does it smell? For instance, you might smell wheat. You might smell it at a high level, medium, low. So this is the sort of thing we put in here. You might see a comment judging that high level of sweet, grainy malt. What hops? So it's not just yes hops or no hops. What type of hops? For instance, were they citrusy? If they were citrusy, were they orange, tangerine, lime, grapefruit? And you can, as you develop as a judge, you'll start to get more detailed in these comments and descriptors. So for instance, when I might have first started describing beer, I might have said citrusy hops. Now I'm a lot more likely to say it's white or pink grapefruit or tangerine, and actually be a bit more descriptive, because there's a whole range of citrus aromas. So you need to describe what you're getting, what type of it, and how much of it. So you should say, for instance, high level of citrus hops, white grapefruit, tangerine. Describe what you're getting. Esters. Now these are the fruity sort of compounds you normally get from fermentation. So you might get a high level of it with something like some English styles, or you might get very little of it with an American style or something that's been fermented cooler. Normally the warmer it's fermented, the more esters you get, but there are exceptions to that. For instance, some of the Kveiks, you might get very little esters out of them even though they're done warmer. You can't ever make assumptions about the process or how that beer's been brewed. You can only describe what you're getting. So you might say you're getting moderate level of fruity esters from the yeast. You can't say that it's because it's been done too warm. It might be the yeast choice. Just bear that in mind with your feedback. Is that level of esters appropriate for that style? If not, you can suggest maybe a different yeast choice, or if it was fermented warm, to ferment cooler next time. And other aromatics. So for instance, you might get spice, you might get some vegetable or fruit aromas in there. Anything that you can smell should get described up here. If you've got an aroma that you smell, whether it's an off aroma, a good aroma, whether it's the style or not, up here. You shouldn't be talking about off flavours in aroma, because obviously it's all about the aroma here. Moving on down to appearance, which is only worth 3 points. Now a lot of people don't realise that. They look at a beer, and it's quite common outside of the judging world to first drink the beer with your eyes. There's several schools of thought, but some of them actually say that a cloudy beer is a bad beer. It's not necessarily true. There was a time when the main reason for cloudiness was poor cellar keeping or infection. Nowadays that's not normally the case. There's many reasons for a beer to be hazy or cloudy or not clear. It's weighted as being 3 points out of the 50. So in other words, that's what, 6% of the score. So down here we're looking for the colour of the beer, the colour of the head, the clarity of the beer. Does the head hang around? Is it, what's the retention of it? The texture of the head. Now, the other things we might be looking for is, because I mean, with the darker beers, it's not always easy to tell if they're opaque or if they're just dark coloured. So we might use a light here to see if they're just dark or if they're really hazy and cloudy. Just to see, because with some of the dark beers, they look like you can't see through them, but you shine a light and they're brilliantly clear. So these are the things that go here. Now each judge has their own system for how they do things. Despite judges doing things in slightly different ways in their own head, we normally come together and normally in the same ballpark on the score straight away. So for instance, if the beer's the wrong colour, they might take 1 point off. If there's no head retention at all, they might take 1 off. If it's totally the wrong colour, absolutely no head, and hazy as anything, they might take 3 off. All depending on if it's appropriate for the style or not. But even the worst looking beer, if that's all that's wrong with it, will only lose 3 points. Moving on, we look at flavour. So the things we're looking for here, we're looking for the malt flavour, intensity, type, hops, fermentation characteristics, the balance on the beer, the finish, aftertaste of it, and anything else that you get in the flavour of the beer. So that all goes here. It's worth 20 points. Some judges build up for each positive, some take off for each negative. But what you're trying to do here is just compare the flavours you're getting in the beer to what it says that style's flavour should be. So for instance, if it says you should get restrained noble hops or floral hops, and what you're getting is pungent citrus, then that's obviously not to style, so that will affect the scoring. So that's all the types of characters we're looking for here. This is where you will talk about off flavours, but you shouldn't be talking about how something smells in this section. Moving on down to mouthfeel, worth 5 points. So you'll be talking about things like the body of the beer, the carbonation, alcohol warmth, smoothness, creaminess, any astringency, or any other sensations you get on your palate. So for instance, a highly carbonated beer, you might describe the tongue-tingling sensation, things like that. All that information goes under mouthfeel. And again, it's compared to the style guide. Is it appropriate for the style? 5 points at year 50. So then, there's 10 points for overall impression. This one's a bit more subjective. It's more about how enjoyable the beer is, what your impression of drinking it is, things like that. So the overall drinking and pleasure associated with the entry and any suggestions for improvement go in this section. It's worth 10 points. And that takes us through the entire score sheet then. So that, if that was all filled in, you'd have a score assigned to the beer. The two judges would talk, compare their score, make sure that they're reasonably tallied. Most competitions, judges must be within 7 points of each other. Normally they're a lot closer. And they'll decide on what's called a consensus score. You might find that one judge has scored a beer 37, another scored it 35, and they decide to call it 36 for a consensus score. If it's just on the border between two scores, for instance, if one called it 30 and the other called it 29, then they might decide to up it or down it one way or the other for the consensus score. That's the the written or the full score sheet. The next one that got introduced was, bear with me, ding, ding, was the checklist score sheet. Now this was introduced mainly to help speed up the scoring process or the judging process, because you can say a lot of things here with a few ticks instead of writing out 3 sentences. So we'll quickly go down it and you'll see a lot of similarities, even though it's laid out slightly different and it looks different. So up the top here you'll find the information about who's judging your beer, what category and style it was entered in, any special ingredients. So that's all information we've seen before. Down this section down here we've got the scoring guide again, saying if it's 45 to 50 it's a world-class example, so that information's there. And down the bottom we've got a grid, so you can see that these are mainly the descriptors that were down the left hand side on the previous sheet. So for instance, if there's acetaldehyde here, you might just find a tick here, or you might find an LMH written here to say it was low in the aroma, or something was very high in the mouthfeel, for instance. And it just gives you a bit more information, but without taking up a lot of room. So moving up to our main sections again, you'll see we've still got our aroma, appearance, flavour, mouthfeel and overall impression. The scores are all still the same for each section, but what you'll see here is, for instance, we've got a lot of descriptors already on the page. If a tick or cross goes into this first box here with the no entry sign above it, it means it wasn't there or it wasn't detectable. So for instance, you might have a tick there saying that they couldn't detect any malt aroma. You might have a tick here saying that there was a moderate hop aroma, and over here you'll find a tick to say what type. So for instance, if I wanted to say that this beer's got a high grainy malt and a moderate citrusy hop, I can literally just put a tick there for high, a tick there for grainy, and what did I say, moderate citrusy hop, I'll put a tick there and a tick there. That's 2 sentences done in 4 ticks. So I've still then got all this area over here where I can write comments about it and let you know if maybe you needed more of a certain type of hop or whatever. That information can all still go on the sheet over here. I've just used some tick boxes to do the describing of the beer instead. Other than that, the process is the same. You still score it out as appropriate out of 12. You comment on if these things that are here are appropriate for the style the beer's been entered in. You've got the ability to write in other descriptors as necessary, both there and there. And then there's just a tick box to say if there were flaws detected in the aroma. On down to appearance, you can quickly tick that it was very high clarity, moderate head, with low retention. And then you can just go on to describe what the colour was. Now these are the main colours that you come across. Sometimes you want to be a bit more specific, in which case you can just write it into the comments what colour the head was. Now the one that normally gets missed is this area here for head texture. So was it a small tight white head, or like say for instance Guinness, that's a very tight head, or was it large loose bubbles? That goes in there. Again, scored out of 3. On to flavour, same thing. You've got a couple of boxes you can write extra descriptors in, or you can just write it in comments. But as you can see, going down here, there's the other 3 check boxes we had down the bottom. The stylistic accuracy, technical merit and intangibles go there. It's basically the same thing, just presented in a different format so the judges can go tick, 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 tick and not have to write those long sentences. Now, that can be a benefit for both entrants and for judges because some judges' handwriting is a lot easier to read than others. And if they're in the latter category, it's easier to look at a couple of ticks rather than try and decipher exactly what they're saying. That was the checklist score sheet. There was a new score sheet introduced at National Homebrew Competition in America this year. This is the slide scale or the sliding score sheet or sliders. Now, straight away, you'll see this looks a little bit different. There's information down the side on how to fill the score sheet in. Other than that, what you'll see is mainly the same sort of things. We've got the scoring guide here. We've got a section for any flaws. And again, they say low, medium, high for anything that's detected. An example of feedback filled in. Now, what most people don't see is this little circle at the end. If there's none detected, you should get a cross or a tick across there. Other than that, you just go put a line, cross, tick, whatever indicator, somewhere between low, medium and high, depending on the level of it detected. We've got our normal judge information, category, subcategory, special ingredients. Position in flight, this isn't always filled in, but if it's the first beer judged in the flight, they'll normally say, oh yeah, one of however many. Whether it got through to a mini boss or not, what place was assigned, and now the consensus score is filled in here. So both the judges do their scoring, again 12, 3, 25, 10 out of 50. They both do their scoring, decide what score they're awarding it, have a chat, come up with a consensus score, and the consensus score should be in that box. So again, here we've got the bottle inspection section. Was it filled adequately? Was the cap half off? Things like that. Malt, and you'll notice there's less room here to describe stuff. You might get just a few words describing the malt there and an intensity. And then there's just a tick box here that tells you whether that was appropriate for the style or not. Still room to write comments on anything that isn't described here and give it a score. Same goes for appearance, flavour, mouthfeel, overall. Now that classic example not to style thing we've had on the others is down here as another sliding scale. So you can just mark anywhere on the sliding scale from classic to not to style. And then all the main feedback goes here. So what you can see with this stylus score sheet, a lot less emphasis is put on describing the beer and more on feedback. Whilst you might have several sentences on malt on the original score sheet, you've only really got room for 3-4 words and a sentence here. But the focus should be on the feedback to the brewer, how appropriate it is for the style, how to improve the beer, how much they did or did not enjoy it. The main reason behind this was to try and speed up the judging process again. If you're judging NHC, National Homebrew Competition, there's thousands of beers being judged. Saving 10 minutes per beer and getting it down to 5 to 10 minutes for a beer instead of 20 minutes for a beer is quite important. That's a look at the 3 different types of score sheets and how we fill them in. You might have seen some of these before if you've entered, for instance, London and South East, the UK National, the Welsh National. I've judged at all of them. I know they use all these score sheets. If you've entered the Welsh, I think we were the first ones to use this slider score sheet in the UK this year. Not every entry got judged on slider score sheets though, because it doesn't really do well with sours. So if you entered a beer into a sour beer category, you probably had one of these instead, because it is just much better at describing, or possibly one of those. It's much better at describing the nuances of sour beer, because the slider score sheet doesn't really cover all the different impressions that you get from sour beer that you don't get in a normal beer. 3 types of score sheets. Now you know what sort of information to expect on them, where information should go and what should be covered in each section. It will hopefully make a bit more sense when we get round to judging a beer together and I fill this in. You know why I've gone up to Aroma to start describing hops, why I've gone there first, why I've mentioned carbonation level down in mouthfeel, things like that. It just gives you an idea what to expect of feedback that you may be giving if you're going to be a judge, or you may be receiving if you're going to be an entrant. Anyway, 30 minutes have gone already, so I'm going to cut you off there, and I'll catch you on the next one where we'll be talking about a different subject. Thanks very much for your time.